Hello and welcome. My name is Robert Sarmast. I specialize in history and religion and mythology, and I wanted to bring some things into your attention about the problems that the world currently faces, why we're here. It's on everybody's mind. And once we understand how we got here, perhaps I can help you understand what is coming for our future. It's not all doom. There's plenty of beautiful things that are waiting for humanity. The reason for this video, and I've already recorded it in Farsi for the Iranian population, my homeland. I've been in the US for 45 years. And about 38 years ago, I decided that I really needed to know what the meaning of life is. And that's what I pursued. I noticed that the universities really didn't teach what I wanted to learn. And I got a very fatalistic kind of answer. Nobody can know these things, so you shouldn't ask. And, that's very much against my nature. If you want to ever rile me up, just tell me I can't know anything or can't be known, because I will go after it. I want to talk to you today about the problems of religion in human society. Um, Everybody knows there are problems, and everybody knows that they are very stand and even harder to fix. But there is a methodical way that I can bring to your attention what these problems are, how they originate, how they can be solved, and where they will lead if you don't solve their problems. There are basically two types of religion in the world. So religions, I mean, there's many different religions, but there's only two types. So one of them is called a religion of authority, which is a religion that basically asks you to believe whatever their holy book or their prophet says, and you're not expected to ask questions to try to figure things out for yourself. In fact, you're discouraged from asking questions, and you're discouraged from trying to personally experience. And you're told that basically whatever these books say came through holy people and God, and who are you to ask questions or want to make them better? This way of thinking is extremely problematic. The reason is that these religions of authority can never grow. They are stagnant, crystallized, and fossilized based on the age of whatever holy book or whenever their prophet lived. That's not to say that there's no truth in them. There's plenty of truth. But since they can't grow, they become problematic as time passes on and humanity advances and we learn more. For instance, there was no science when Christianity was born, or when Islam or Judaism were born. They're all way before the age of science, and therefore there is nothing about science in these books, which is the reason why they are all against science. None of them trust science, and they are very reluctant to listen to the recommendations of science because there's nothing to be found in their holy books, which supposedly, in their minds, should have all the answers that anybody could have about how to live life, how to live a good life, and how to get to heaven and avoid hell, and so forth. And so, because they don't question, because they don't have critical thinking, because they rob themselves of the ability to ask questions, to think for themselves. And when they run across something that sounds very primitive, illogical, nonsensical, they have no choice but to ignore these things because they can't let their understanding of religion be bothered by questions about problematic statements in those religions and their holy books. For instance, the advent of the last few years with what we experienced with COVID, if you noticed all of these religions, and I'm talking about monotheistic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all of them refused to wear masks or get vaccinated, and they brushed the whole thing off in the beginning. It was why was that? The reason is that the answers are no. in their holy books because there is no science in their holy books. And there's nothing in there about viruses and diseases. So at the time these books were written, and you have to understand that all of these evolutionary religions have a lifespan. They're born, grow, they get strong, they start to falter, age, and eventually die. So that may be something surprising to a lot of people, but all religions are born and all religions eventually die. The three monotheistic religions we have right now, none of them is older than 3,000 years old. And if you go past that time, if you go before that time, none of them would have even existed. Nobody would have known who Jesus, Moses, or Muhammad is. And they had their own religions, hundreds, if not thousands of religions, racial, national religions, mostly pagan, where the idea of one God, there being one God was a big joke. And they had their very strange understanding of life, totally unscientific. They didn't know about, let's say, gravity. They didn't know about high pressure and low pressure. When thunder struck, when lightning came, when earthquakes came, when they had any kind of a question about how do the things that we have in this world work the way they do, they didn't have any scientific answers. There was no science. So everything in their minds was governed by the gods, either the good gods or the bad gods or the devils or what have you. So let's say when you got very ill, they didn't know it's because of a virus. They believed that it's because you had either done something wrong, sinful, and had earned this disease the hard way, or the devil had brought it to you, or some demon or some jinn or something had cursed you. That was the way the world was seen. Everything. In fact, if I could transport you to the mind of a person that lived during that period thousands of years ago, you would find their world viewpoint quite comical, because the whole world was really kind of like a fairy tale to them. The river moved because there was a river ghost in there. Lightning and thunder came because a god was angry and was throwing a lightning bolt to kill somebody. The storm came because of the storm god. The vegetation grew because of the vegetation god. Everything was ascribed to some kind of a god, and that's how they explained everything, because there was no science. They had no idea how the magical things in this world worked. So they had to make things up, and that usually involved these gods. So at that time, diseases were considered things that are brought on because you either did something wrong or a devil got you. And so there's nothing about science and viruses in their books. And therefore, when COVID came to our era, they refused to accept masks or vaccines, all of them, all of them that are supposedly so different from each other. They all agreed on that one thing, that we don't need to do those things because we know where diseases come from. As our holy book says, they come from demons or sins or what have you. So they all start making these critical mistakes that cost them dearly, but they have no choice, because these religions of authority demand absolute obedience. They demand for you not to think for yourself. They demand that you don't ask questions. They demand that you listen to their holy book, word by word, to the last letter. And therefore, they cannot grow and they cannot advance as time moves on. And as time moves on, these religions usually become more and more backward because they're simply unable to keep step with evolutionary growth of human society. How can a book evolve? It's written on paper with ink. A book can't update itself. It can't change itself. And if you have completely given your mind to a religion of authority where you refuse to think for yourself, you've basically taken your brain out of your head, and instead you put that book in there, because that book is supposed to do all the thinking for you. It's supposed to have all the answers for you. there's no reason to go outside there. In fact, if you go outside and ask questions, you've done something wrong. So you're scared to do that. Everything you supposedly need to do is there. And if you don't understand what that book says about any particular topic, that's where the priests and the mullahs and the rabbis to do the interpretation for you. And of course, these interpretations and the writings of these books, um, again, there's plenty of truth in them, but there's also plenty of things that over time become more and more problematic because they are living in the past and they have not adapted the growth in our understanding in various fields because they simply cannot adapt. They cannot update by default. They are fossilized and crystallized forever. That is the definition of a religion of authority. And if you notice, most of these religions, they don't like advances in modern life. They don't like the modern life in general. And the reason is that their books that are supposedly their guide, their guiding light in life, don't really have answers for a lot of the problems of modern life. So modern life really troubles them because they don't know what to do. If you are completely obsessed with a holy book or religion and you basically robbed yourself of the ability to think for yourself, then as life expands and human society grows and evolves, then you're going to have more and more problems because the problems of modern life don't have answers in these ancient books. And so you have to revert to more and more interpretations, which really don't make sense. And eventually you have sort of a cognitive dissonance because you have to believe this book, and at the same time, the reality of the world does not conform to the answers in these books. And therefore, it becomes a conundrum. You become stuck in life. You can't grow because your book can't grow. And if the book can't grow, then how can you adapt to modern life? They always want to go back to a previous period. Let's make America great again. Let's go back to a more simple time. Let's just have a life where we don't have modern things in them. We'll live the way people lived 100 or 1,000 years ago when things were simple. These are all due to these religions of authority that disallow human beings to think. Now, it's important to understand that a lot of people prefer this kind of a religion because they don't want to think. Thinking involves growing, growing involves pain, change. And a lot of people really are scared. Maybe they've been scared to think for themselves, and I hope you're not one of them. I pray those of you who are caught in these kinds of religions to be able to think for yourself and come out and be able to take a breath of fresh air and understand that you can take the good things, the true things in these religions and lose the bad things, the ridiculous things that make no sense, and not think that your faith is gone. Okay, your faith should not be dependent on accepting a holy book verbatim, word by word. You should be able to understand that all of these holy books, were written by men, usually by lots of different men. Some of them were holy, some of them were not so holy. And some of those things in those books have errors. It doesn't mean if you let it go that you've let go of God and you don't have faith anymore. And I know probably to a lot of people it seems scary because you don't have that feeling of safety as having this book that answers everything for you and keeps you from having to ask those sometimes uncomfortable questions. Which brings us to the second type of religion, which is called the religion of personal experience. This kind of religion is one that actually requires you to think for yourself and to ask questions, and tells you that God wants you to ask questions. He does not expect blind obedience. He wants you to have an understanding, a very foundational understanding of why he wants what he wants, why he says what he says. and he wants you to grow personally by having an active relationship with the God that lives in your mind and guides you as best as possible, although he has to give you free will. And that means you have the choice to listen or not. This is definitely a more challenging path. A lot of people are scared of it, but if you want to find the truth doesn't come free. If you think you can find the truth by just reading books, you have had a very fundamental misunderstanding of what the truth is. Truth is alive, it's living within you. It's always trying to reach you where you are at the level that you are to raise you just one step. That is the religion of personal experience. You personally experience it and you personally think for yourself. And you have to grow. This is the kind of religion that keeps you growing because it's alive. It's not a static, crystallized, fossilized religion that's based on something that happened, whatever, how many thousands of years ago. Again, there are plenty of good things that happened in those religions and in those religious events, but that doesn't mean that now, thousands of years later, there's no room for expansion. There's no room for update. There's no room for improving. When science came along, science enabled us to get rid of a lot of superstitions that had gone on for thousands of years. So it's a corrective thing, this field of science. It corrects you, it purifies what you spiritually experience so that what you come to realize is not based on some dreams, some spiritual event that you think was real, but it could have been just nonsense. It's science that purifies it and corrects it and lets it live on better than it was before. So it's not about destroying these old religions. It's about refining them, updating them, and adapting them to present day society. I can believe in science and in God at the same time. These two things are supposed to be together. God is the creator of science. Every molecule, every atom in existence in our planet, down to the last one, is completely submerged in, activated by, and governed by the laws of mathematics, the laws of physics, and the laws of chemistry. Every single atom in existence. We are engulfed in these laws. But where did these laws come from? Have to think clearly, think bravely. Ask God to help you understand. Remember, ask and you shall be open to you. Seek and you shall find. But the truth doesn't give itself so freely where you can just read a bunch of books and think you understand it, because truth is alive. It's adaptive. It's always concerned with you where you are, with your level of understanding. The Word of God is alive. It's not a book. Spirit moves within you as a living being. These are the two types of religion in the world. And why are we in the situation we're in currently in this world? Well, it has very much to do with what we just discussed. So what happens is these static crystallized religions cannot update, cannot grow, cannot evolve by nature. By default, they're meant to crystallize and stay where they are. Books don't write themselves. They don't update themselves. So they, perforce, have to stay where they are, however many thousands of years they were born, and whatever the mentality of those people was, and what their knowledge level was. So time moves on and the world grows, and these religions cannot grow. So the reason we get into the situations that we're in now in this world aren't really that complicated. You see, for us to grow, we have to understand that we live in one world that's a connected world. It's one organism. And when you have selfishness and racism and nationalism, these are by default divisive things. They are against the concept that all is one. And you don't have to believe this or understand this in a spiritual way. We know through science that all matter is energy, In reality, it's all just one form of energy, and that energy never dies. It can only change, but it can never die. So you can understand spiritually that God is one, that all of us are his children, and we're all brothers and sisters, and that we all have to help each other, regardless of race, nationality, or religion, or any of those divisive things. That you come to an understanding that there's just one life and one creator and one humanity. And what's good for you has to come doing good to others because it's all just one organism, it's one body. When you have these divisive religions and nationalities and races who are dead set against each other, they're making a terrible, fatal mistake in that they don't understand that they're all one and part of one body. It's like if the stomach says, I don't need the brain, I hate the brain, and I'm going to try to destroy the brain because he's different from me. And the brain says, I'm going to destroy the heart. I don't like the heart, keeps all this blood moving. And the heart says, I don't like the legs, and the legs don't like the hands, and all of the organs are working against each other. And what does that create? That creates a dysfunctional, broken down body, which is what we have in our world right now. A broken down world that cannot cooperate, that does not know how to get along. So, what's happening right now is as technology progresses, as science progresses, as we become closer and closer to each other, and the world becomes ever smaller, what used to take 6 months to travel from one side of the world to the other, and that was just a few hundred years ago. Before that, that would be even you couldn't even dream of doing something like you didn't even know what the world was. You just thought it was a flat thing. So um, the point is that as time moves on and as we grow and as science expands and improves and as our knowledge base gets better, these religions simply cannot adapt. And since these religions are naturally divisive, Islam says, we're against the Jews, we're against the Christians are against the Jews. They're all against each other, like that poor body, where all the organs were working against each other, thinking that they're doing themselves a favor, thinking that what they're doing is for the benefit of their own organ, without realizing that that organ is part of one body. And if you think that hurting another organ is in your best interest, you have a fundamental misunderstanding of reality. Think about it in scientific ways that we're all just one energy, we're just one part of one body, and whatever energy comes out of you has to come back to you. Or you can think of it in a spiritual way. Take your pick, it doesn't make a difference. What's important is to realize that you're part of one body. Now you have our modern world, which is getting closer. All these, we know so much more than we did just because of the digital revolution. And so the world is getting more and more connected culturally, in every way. We are becoming more and more aware of each other. Our lives are becoming more and more entrenched and dependent on each other. There's never been a point in history where a collapse of one nation or another would immediately impact the health of the finance of another nation halfway around the world. This is the first time in human history that this is so. And that's why we are living in such a critical and unprecedented era that needs very careful attention to these facts if we're going to, well, or actually just walk into a nightmare situation. As the world gets more and more connected, we have a problem because the people in that world are all divided. The world wants to connect. The finances are already intertwined, interconnected, interdependent. We're all interconnected now. But we are against each other because of racism, nationalism, sexism, take your pick, or religions, of course. So basically, we have a humanity that is operating the same way it has been since the Stone Age, where you would live in a cave and then you would go dominate other caves, take their wealth, make a bigger cave, and then set about to conquer more territory. This is the fundamental way that humanity has been operating since thousands of years ago, but it simply does not work anymore because of this interconnection and interdependency between these nations and races and religions. You simply cannot operate with that same system of behavior. The world has changed, it's fundamentally changed. And the only way you're going to survive these changes is to make fundamental changes in the ways you behave. And the first of that would be to understand that what's good for you is going to be what's good for them. That if you want to help yourself, you have to help them. That this way of just taking their stuff and then not having to worry about it, and when your own society falls apart, just moving somewhere else where these problems don't exist, doesn't work anymore because this small planet is now under one very similar condition, which is all of these nations are at each other's throats because of this fundamental misunderstanding of reality. And of course, change is difficult, but we have reached this very critical impasse in human history. It's so big that I would say it's a critical impasse for our species. That's the kind of importance of the historic significance of where humanity is at right now, because you're being forced to grow, you're being forced to evolve. And if you don't, you will go the way of what evolution does not favor, if you know what I mean. Must understand that we're all one, and you must be able to adapt and update without fearing that your faith in God is somehow been troubled because you no longer have this comfortable book to believe in and think everything in there is true, and not being able to accept science or the things that come up in human society as we evolve. You will get further and further thrown back. Your life will become more and more difficult. And if it's a country like Iran where the theocracy is actually in charge of the government, then all the more, because now you have religion and government joined hand in hand in their descent into chaos and taking everybody in that country or that race with them. Not only to pick on Iran, it's everybody. It's the Christians, it's the entire West, it's Judaism. The whole planet right now is facing the same problem. And if you cannot adapt and evolve and treat each other with respect and understand that you're all part of one body, then you will go the way of Dustin of history. You must adapt. This has been a sort of off the cuff video where I just explain some pretty petty, complicated subjects in a very matter of fact, plain way. And I think you understand the situation we're in, hopefully better. And now that you do, I will continue this work and use this information to show you where humanity is headed in the future. Thank you.